In our last session, we were unpacking this insult of John that we read in Luke 3 verse 7, where he calls, as we know from Matthew's account, the Pharisees and the Sadducees a brood of snakes. And we saw that the Pharisees were the blue-collar movement for tradition, where they were preaching a message of acceptance that came through obeying hundreds and hundreds of rules. You know, they were the laity, the blue-collar laity, inviting people to have a relationship with God that was based on legalism rather than freedom. But the other group of religious leaders that John and Jesus challenge are the group called the Sadducees. And they were the religious leaders of the day. So if the Pharisees were the blue-collar laity, the Sadducees were the upper-class aristocracy, the priesthood. And their position meant that they were backed by the Romans. And by John's time, Jesus' time, they were in a position of power where they controlled two of the most significant things in the Jewish nation. They controlled the Jerusalem temple, or what's often known as Herod's temple, and their position as the priesthood and this aristocracy meant they pretty much had a monopoly and a control on what happened in the temple. But they also controlled the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin was made up of, I think it's 72 leaders, and they would effectively be the governing body for the religious and legal identity of the nation. So the Sadducees were the ones who actually held the power. Whereas the Pharisees were a group that had influence, the Sadducees were a group who held power. And the differences between the Sadducees and the Pharisees are quite significant, because the Sadducees believed in the written law only. They believed in the Torah and only the Torah. So they rejected the Pharisees' oral traditions of saying that the Moses had been allowed to interpret it, and they held to a very strict interpretation of the written law, rejecting the Pharisees. And in many ways the Sadducees and the Pharisees were religious opponents who were enemies of each other, but united by a common enemy in John and Jesus. They believed in unrestrained free will. And what I mean by that is they believed that God had no role in the personal day-to-day life. In other words, everyone was the master of their own destiny. That actually God didn't get involved, and people were up to themselves to achieve their own destiny. They were self-fulfilling. Their theology was quite interesting in that they actually rejected all things supernatural. So whereas the Pharisees believed in a number of aspects of the supernatural, the Sadducees didn't. And there's an old joke that says this is why they were sad, you see. They didn't believe in angels, they didn't believe in demons, they didn't believe in heaven, they didn't believe in hell, they didn't believe in resurrection. You know, they were marked by all the things they didn't believe in. You know, it was almost as if they believed that the souls die with the body. In other words, when you die, that's it, kaput, that's the end, there is no afterlife. Can you imagine religious leaders going through all this ritual in the temple but not believing in any afterlife? It sort of makes you ask the question of why? Why would they do all of that? And that's where we have to understand that their beliefs were shaped in the idea of ritual purity qualifying them for rewards. And that their ritual purity qualified them to lead the temple services, which is what generated their income. And many people, when they look at the Sadducees, they recognise that this was a group of people where their number one belief was that if you followed the ritual purity, you could gather all this wealth and you became rich. And this whole approach shaped their theology, shaped the whole way they did life. No wonder that when John and Jesus came, they challenged the whole Sadducee belief system, because they challenged the whole here and now. As we start to think about the Sadducees, I think sometimes we're in danger of living in a similar way, because if we're not careful, our whole perspective comes in the here and now. But what we do in the way that we do church and the way that we live is that the thoughts of the afterlife are almost, if you like, a secondary issue. It's actually about what we do now, and destiny is about what we achieve here on earth, rather than realising, as great as it is here on earth, it's but a blink of the eye. You know, it's minuscule in terms of comparison to what we inherit in eternity. And the danger is that if we live our Christian lives in a way that we lose sight of our eternal destiny, we reduce our faith to nothing more than a materialistic, ritualistic existence that says if we go through the ritualistic ways of being obedient to the law, then we will achieve success in this life. And if that's a belief that we hold, we're no different to the Sadducees. And the challenge for us is that we need to step beyond looking at just the here and now and what we do today, and start to realise that when we come into a relationship with God, eternity starts today. And we're living not just for now, but we are living to an eternal destiny. And I wonder how much of what you do today is shaped with an eye on your eternal destiny.